gone through some of the top line agreements as part of that deal, or proposals that were part of that deal, the 42 days initial phase one of the deal, the 33 hostages that would be released, but nothing in those three phases that would suggest that it's a done deal that Hamas leave power. And that, of course, was one of the key aims that Netanyahu had of going into this conflict in the first place, to retrieve the hostages, still not done, and to get Hamas out of power, still not done, which is why it is politically very sensitive if he were to sign a deal here with the ultra-right-wing element of his government, presumably looking to resign and therefore bring it down. As Amster says here, Tom, this deal is a disaster. Hamas is just going to rebuild and prepare for the next October the 7th. I don't know if Israel has any other option, as this war has been going on for too long, but it's not good at all, says Amster. Here's Gavin. This is Trump's victory and I can't stand the man. It is also the Democrats' shame because they always had the power. I just hope this works in the long term. I mean, it does. It is it not, completely remarkable that Trump's insistence that this happens with the threat to Israel of funds potentially being withdrawn, of no more military arms sale, whatever that threat was, and of course the threat to Hamas, which was don't push your luck, seems to have been one of the things, I'm not for a moment saying it was everything, seems to have been one of the things that has changed the calculation to bring people to the table. Biden could have done that. 03456060973, the President-elect Donald Trump saying we have a deal for the hostages in the Middle East. They will be released shortly. He signs off saying thank you. Looking for your thoughts on this too. 03456060973, the number. Let's speak to Chris Gunnis, who's the former chief spokesperson for UNRWA. Thank you for coming on the programme, Chris. Your thoughts about what this deal would mean in theory for more humanitarian aid getting into Gaza?
Well, look, it's very clear that the Gaza Strip now, for this deal to stick, has got to be simply flooded with humanitarian aid. Now, the UN has an office, the Office of the Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator. She has a pretty dismal record, I have to say, so far in getting aid into Gaza, but that effort has to be ramped up. She has to work with the Israelis on deconfliction in phase one when the Israelis move east and get out of Gaza. We simply have to see all of the crossing points, not just the Erez crossing point in the north of Gaza, but the Kerem Shalom, the Rafah crossing in the south. They've got to be open 24/7. Gaza's got to be flooded with aid, because what we're seeing now is desperate people. We're seeing aid convoys being looted in full, in clear sight of the Israelis. We're seeing the Israelis shoot directly and killing aid workers. WFP workers have been killed. They put out a statement saying this. So, yeah, we need, in the initial phase, Gaza to be flooded with food, with water, with sanitation products for women, for everything that has been held up, including food, because that is a subject of an accusation of using famine, starvation as a deliberate weapon of war. All of that has got to be addressed. And thereafter, we've got to see reconstruction on a massive scale. Now, one of the problems there is the huge amount of unexploded ordnance. So after the 2014-15 war, when I was there, we had to go in very quickly and demine. And it's a massive, massive demining operation that has to go on, as well as the recovery of bodies.
That would be part of the phase 3 element of this deal. I just wonder, Chris, whether you feel it is reasonable that Hamas are removed as the leadership of Gaza.
Look, this has been the problem all along, and I've always said you can't defeat what is essentially a political movement with a vicious terrorist wing by dropping high-altitude bombs and carpet bombing them. That doesn't work. That's never happened in the history of trying to change or promote a different government. I mean, it's very clear to me, having spent so much time in Gaza, that the only way to defeat Hamas is at the ballot box. And indeed, there was an election in 2006, and Hamas gave up the struggle. They gave up the terrorism. They recognized Israel by taking part in the Oslo architecture, which was the election. So, that is how, if you want to talk about defeat, Hamas has been defeated. They were in 2006 when they stood in elections. So, it's very clear. I don't know
that their suggestion of what should happen to Israelis and Jewish people was defeated.
I beg your pardon. The only, as far as I'm aware, the only organisation that talks about from the river to the sea is the Likud Charter, which makes it clear that from the river to the Likud, the right-wing Israeli party, that from the river to the sea there should be no. That's for Jews
Hamas has
only.
called for the extermination of all Jewish people.
Well, if you look at their charter from 2017, and I'm not a Hamas spokesman, and I'm certainly not a Hamas apologist, and I've condemned many times what took place in October in October the year before last. Though, as I've always said, it had a context. There was a siege going on, but nonetheless, I think it's clear that Hamas has been part of the talks. Netanyahu and the Israelis and Trump and others, to get to this point, have had to talk to Hamas. If Hamas had been defeated, presumably this deal would not even have been possible. If the deal is going to be implemented, it is going to be necessary, I think, for Hamas at least to say, yes, they approve of the deal being implemented. So the idea that the people with whom the deal was forged and the people who are going to implement this deal should suddenly be wiped off the face of the earth, is it not logical that that would destroy the deal itself? So I think we have to make up, be realistic here. I think if this deal is going to be implemented, if the hostages are going to come home, if the Palestinian prisoners are going to be freed, if we're going to see Gaza recover and enter a new phase when, in my wildest dreams, I would like to think that these are two peoples that can live side by side in a two-state solution. It feels like a distant dream and a long way away. But when everyone wakes up from this, I'm afraid to say, for my money, that is the only road to go down, because a military defeat of a political organization through carpet bombing, I'm sorry, folks, to have to tell you, it is impossible. That's a simple fact. So we need to make this deal stick. It is Hamas, with whom the deal was negotiated, that have to be involved in implementing. That makes perfect sense to me. Whether you like Hamas or not, that's going to have to happen if you want the hostages to come home. And thereafter, if we are going to flood Gaza with aid, and if we are going to see meaningful reconstruction, which I think all agreed, Blinken has said as much, others have said as much, then we have to work with the people we have on the ground to make this happen.